Welcome back to Out of Office, the bi-weekly web show for remote workers. We recently celebrated a year of Out of Office, and it is extraordinary to realize how many people it's reached. I lost count around 20 million, and that was months ago. Now, I spend every single day obsessing about remote work and talking with remote workers around the world about the issues that they care about. But there's one thing that one person said this year, which just burrowed its way into my brain like a little truth worm. And I've found myself thinking about it quite literally every single day since then. So today, I thought I'd share it with you. You're just in time for Out of Office, episode 46. I was in Lisbon when I heard it. I was attending the world's largest remote work conference, but this wasn't one of the big hyped up keynotes. It was in a much smaller space. There were only maybe 30 people there, and the person speaking was someone I'd never heard of, who was CEO of a company that I'd never heard of. And now, in these kind of talks, typically the presenter rambles about how great their product is, and everyone kind of nods along and maybe stifles a yawn or two. But Chris's topic was the 5 dysfunctions of remote teams, so I was curious to hear what he had to say. And he did say some pretty interesting stuff around unclear decisions and a lack of transparency. For example, when a topic is complex, everyone does their best to communicate, but it's almost impossible to strike the right balance. I mean, a short update might lack important context or detail, but on the other hand, a long update might not get right at all. So, whichever option you pick, miscommunication is inevitable. It's kind of like that 2-door riddle from Labyrinth, where one door leads to your destination and the other to certain death. Except in this case, there's no objectively correct answer, and both doors lead to communication issues and inefficient teamwork. But what Christophe said next completely reframed the way that I think about this topic. Firstly, he pointed out that miscommunication is not unique to remote work. These are the same communication challenges that have affected large organizations for decades, because someone who works on a different floor from you may as well be in a different country. And when you really think about it, these kinds of communication issues are both the reason that so many companies are calling everyone back into the office, and the reason that calling people back into the office won't really fix anything. Because the work is still distributed, and miscommunications will happen just as often. The problem is just dressed up to look a little bit more familiar. And the second thing that Chris did to reframe my perspective is he stopped blaming people for miscommunication. And we've all worked on a project that moves too slow because the project manager spends more time writing meeting notes than actually making progress, or a task that gets held up because someone is out sick, or a ticket that can't be closed because it doesn't quite fit into any of the scenarios in the playbook. Now, these are all situations where typically a person gets blamed. The person in charge of the brief, or the project, or the playbook. It's their fault if it's missing important information, right? Or if it's moving too slowly. But what Chris said helped me realize that these are symptoms of a bigger problem. Everyone thinks that they're communicating clearly, and clearly everyone else is the problem, because their communications are incomplete, or too dense, or unclear, or unactionable. When miscommunications happen, we're so quick to blame the person who chose the door that we went through that we don't even consider that the other door had miscommunication behind it as well. It is only when we take a step back and stop casting blame that we can see and start fixing the root cause. And according to Chris, the root cause of miscommunication is channel overload. We're all collaborating over some combination of meetings, calls, emails, chats, docs, tickets. One wants to manage up, one wants to manage down, and God knows what else. Keeping all of those things up to date isn't just a chore, it's a miracle. And dropping a channel or two doesn't actually solve it, it just moves the problem around. Miscommunications between distributed teams is an old problem, and we know already that you cannot solve it by treating the symptoms. But that doesn't mean it's unsolvable. It's not like the theory of perpetual motion, or one of MC Escher's impossible machines. What Chris said that has stuck with me ever since was that miscommunication is not only solvable, it will be solved in the next few years, but not with a new tool. We don't need another tool. We need glue. We need a connective layer that stitches all those different channels together, that remembers every single project update, every single ticket, and can connect the dots and deliver every single person the exact update they need without anyone else needing to type it up, and can do that faster and more perfectly than the most talented project manager on earth. Now, this is not as unrealistic as it sounds, and in fact, what prompted me to create this episode was the news that Google has just released something that promises to do it. Just a couple weeks ago, Google released Duet AI, which was in the works years before ChatGPT came along, and it's basically the exact kind of smart glue between channels that Chris inspired me to think about all year. If you missed the start of a meeting, no worries, it'll catch you up with a quick summary of what you missed. If you don't have time to read all of these documents that you're supposed to review, no problem, it can summarize them for you. Write emails for you, visualize data, write code, the list is endless. It's kind of like a finite version of ChatGPT that's tailor-made to suit you and your company and already exists in all the right places that you already work. Like all AI, the potential for misuse does exist, and the Duet product page takes great care to address the precautions that they've taken for safety and security. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. What I'm really thinking about is the opportunity that it represents, which is truly extraordinary. This, or whatever comes along to replace it, could finally be that glue, the connective layer that solves miscommunication for distributed teams. And that would be a huge win, not just for remote workers, but for every company with more than one office. Although I can think of a few that might be a little slower to admit that they have the problem that it solves. Now, I want to hear from you. What admin task do you have that you wish Duet AI could solve for you? Now, forget about what it can really do. I want your blue sky wish list up in those comments. And if you ask nicely, I may even tell you mine. That's all we've got time for this week. I'm Andrew Allen, and the future of work is out of office.